Roslyn becomes a hurricane near the coast of Mexico on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October 22nd. Right now we have two systems active. Hurricane Roslyn strengthening and possibly on the verge of rapidly intensifying as it approaches the coast of Mexico. And 25W still holding on to TD status according to our analyst team, although it still has a very questionable status. Code yellow right now. In the Atlantic, the National Hurricane Center have marked an area of interest on day 144 of hurricane season, 20%, moving off towards the central Atlantic and eventually towards the US East Coast, although it is very unlikely to develop, and if it does, it would be very short-lived and weak. In the Eastern Pacific, Roslyn is still a fair way away from land, but is likely to intensify quite a bit as it approaches the coast of Jalisco, where it could strike as a hurricane in the next couple of days. It could still get to high-end Category 2 or even Category 3 status. In the Western Pacific, 25W will saunter into the South China Sea, already starting to do that, and a 60% area of interest that we've been tracking for a few days now, entering the Philippine Sea and could become a threat to anywhere along the Eastern Asian region. And now a 90% chance for that area of interest that we've been monitoring for so long in the North Indian Ocean. It seems almost time for it to enter center stage, and it looks like we could see cyclone genesis within the next 24 hours and landfall in 3 days. Latest satellite imagery, and this is what the Atlantic is looking like right now. A massive fog of dry air over the Gulf of Mexico there and the Yucatan, and a big long front extending from Central America right the way through eastern Cuba and up towards the northeast. Tropical systems, well, there's that system down the right hand side. That is that area of interest, if you saw it there, small thing. And this is Hurricane Roslyn. As of the recording, it's not official yet, but they might go with it at their update, which gets released when this Tropical Weather Bulletin gets released at 0 UTC. But we're calling it a hurricane at this point, and there it is on the latest satellite imagery. Some of the last daylight frames there before we lost the light, showing some big cloud top blow-ups there around the northern semicircle of what appears to be a rather small eye there. A compact system in general, really, and certainly looks like it might be on the road to rapid intensification. That is one of the telltale signs when you start to see those cloud tops blowing up, arcing all the way around that eye there. Usually when you see two on opposite sides is when we really start to see it get going. But right now it does appear that we are seeing some intensification. How rapid? We're not really fully sure right now, but you can see on the infrared imagery the eye becoming a little bit better defined with those latest images and getting just a slight bit deeper around those cloud tops. But generally the eye hasn't fully emerged yet. There's a wider shot now and a more lengthier shot showing the full picture and some clouds and thunderstorms possibly reaching the coast of Jalisco and possibly further east across Michoacan and possibly further. And this is the full infrared view, taking a look at the picture there, and you can see that the outer bands are already starting to reach the coast of Mexico. And this is the Western Pacific, and you can see that tropical depression, whether it's got a circulation or not, is still an open question. And looking further east, a massive area of disturbed weather, and some of that is eventually going to develop into our potentially next tropical cyclone, although latest models are suggesting it might actually be two separate systems, and that's really starting to cause some confusion. Indian Ocean, if you look closely, you'll start to see the system beginning to turn northwestwards there through the Andaman Islands and now into the Bay of Bengal proper. So this is when we're going to start to see this system potentially develop. And looking towards the southern hemisphere right now, things looking fairly quiet, although quite a bit of rain along the eastern coast of Australia. Flood prone at the moment, I believe, and further out towards the east, quite a few thunderstorms blowing up across the Solomon Islands, over towards Vanuatu, New Caledonia, and eventually towards further along now to the east there. Sea surface temperatures underneath Roslyn right now are at their peak in the eastern Pacific, 30 degrees Celsius. They'll start to drop just a little bit as the storm proceeds northwestwards. Looking in the Caribbean Sea, still very warm there, 30 degrees plus for any late season systems that might find themselves there. Where that current system is, right in the centre of the Atlantic, temperatures there probably around 27 degrees Celsius, I would say, and they're going to get a little bit warmer for it shortly. Indian Ocean, still very warm temperatures indeed, pushing 30 degrees once again, and in the western Pacific also decent temperatures. South China Sea, the western part, a little bit on the cool side now, but look further east over the larger expanses of water, still very warm temperatures pushing 30 degrees, and this pretty much shows you why we get the late season storms. Those waters still piping hot, but not very much along the coast of China and Japan. That's why they rarely get that far in the later season. And looking at the anomalies, it's a cool anomaly along the continent of Asia, but out at sea it's above average. The La Nina effect still very present in the east, and looking at the eastern Pacific, still hit and miss. Roslyn's over a warm spot right now. Caribbean above average, Gulf of Mexico generally above, and the subtropical Atlantic well above. And here is the oceanic heat content showing extremely warm values still persisting in the western Caribbean. Still plenty of time for a storm to take advantage of that. And in the eastern Pacific, just a few little spots there. And in the western Pacific, it seems like the energy is starting to fade a little bit now, although there's still quite a few real hot spots there for late season cyclones. So let's check the computer models. This is what the GFS is showing for this Atlantic system that's been given a 20%, and you can see it quite easily there, and it's getting halfway towards getting a full circulation sorted out, but there's the track of it, and eventually takes it up very close to the to New England. Weak throughout its whole life there, but you can quite easily make out its track. I doubt it would get very much stronger than what the GFS model is showing, and if it does get a tropical storm status or tropical storm force winds, it might not have a full circulation, so we'll keep watching that. Here is Roslyn, hurricane there, possibly category 2, and then making landfall in Jalisco into Nayarit afterwards as well. Just watch that again when it reloads just to see how strong it gets there. It might be underdoing it a little bit, especially with its current intensification rate. Yeah, it initialized it too weak actually, so I would suggest something stronger than what that is showing, and we may see possibly high-end category 2 or a category 3 at peak now, given what it's currently doing. However, it is likely to weaken very rapidly before landfall. A lot of things to watch here, Western Pacific and Indian Ocean. You can see that storm forming there in the Indian Ocean, landfall again in eastern Bangladesh near the Ganges River Delta. You briefly saw that tropical depression continuing into the South China Sea, and in the Philippine Sea, a very broad area that's really struggling to develop and doesn't really develop in that time, and possibly two distinct systems there. It's very hard to tell what's going on with that, but likely will result in higher rainfall in the Philippine area. In Australia, we're still watching that potential system, very low chance of forming there, but it's just scooting along the coast of Queensland and then down New South Wales, and then there's a loop-the-loop in the Bass Strait and down towards the southeast. So certainly a fascinating track, but not likely to become a tropical storm. We will still watch it very closely just in case it decides to do anything funny. And also South Pacific, look at that near Fiji, a system tries to form there on the GFS as well. Other models, not too sure about it yet though. And looking at the rainfall estimates over the next 7 days, once again in the Bangladesh region, we're still looking at rather similar amounts as to what the forecasts were showing yesterday. Later on in that period, when the storm blows through, it looks like we're going to be seeing maximum rainfall amounts pushing 250, maybe 300 millimeters of rain there, that's 12 inches. And inland, still quite high amounts all the way up to the eastern part of the Himalayas, getting up towards 8 inches in some areas, that's 200 millimeters. And down along the coast of Myanmar as well, in the much more near future, you can see some decent amounts of rain there as well, up to possibly 6 inches, 150 millimeters. Of course, if the storm goes faster than expected, then those larger amounts of rainfall out at sea there could transfer inland. Let's check the longer range, day 5 to 10, and the GFS is throwing up a Halloween surprise, unfortunately, in the Eastern Caribbean, and a little bit of a jump scare. There it is, a storm forming, and forming quickly, right at the very end of that run on the 31st into the 1st of November. That's right at the very end of that 10-day period, so we'll have to keep watching that, but this is the first time GFS has shown this within the 10-day period. We'll have to look out for model consistency. None of the other models are on board with it yet though. Western Pacific, what comes of that disturbance? Well, nothing much at first, and then the GFS finally spawns a storm to the east from a different system, I think, and that becomes a typhoon, quite an impressive one as well, and another tropical storm trying to form there to its west. So interesting shenanigans there. The original system that we're currently tracking, I think, pushes through the central Philippines as a very weak system, barely even traceable, and then these two systems come up behind it, so it's a real mess there in the Western Pacific right now. That's all the serious stuff over and done with though. You can scan the barcode and take a look at the Force 13 merch store. We have all of our usual items, including our animations on request, full season and individual bespoke animations. Still waiting for Hone t-shirts, also still available for the duration of our wait for Hone. In the Atlantic then, in the Scilly range, this is what happens. Look at this extremely powerful November hurricane. Shades of Lenny there as it turns northeastwards, absolutely slams Puerto Rico as a category 4 and then continues out towards the northeast. Don't have nightmares about this one just yet. It is in the very long range, and this model could flip-flop extremely easily. GFS has already had a Hispaniola landfall, a Jamaica landfall, and a Cuba landfall from this system so far, and it was in the longer ranges. If we have much more, we'll have bingo probably. And this is the Western Pacific. You can see a strong typhoon there in the end, pushing off northeastwards. Interesting track so late in the season, and eventually stalls and turns backwards on itself and really weakens off. It certainly doesn't have very long when it's at that latitude at this time of year, and it just starts to die off, I think, very close to the Ogasawara island chain. Interesting to watch that. I don't know if it will actually happen that way or whether once again something completely different might happen. My money at the moment is probably on the latter, considering the very high amount of uncertainty quite clearly on display, because run to run we see completely different scenarios. And in the southwest Indian Ocean, there is something out there in the long range as well. This one a little bit closer to our audiences in Mauritius and La Réunion, and you can see there a storm. It still doesn't affect anywhere, albeit, although possibly might make a run for the Seychelles, but that is extremely long range, right towards the end of that 16-day period, and it's only a fairly weak storm. So it's a weak signal at the moment, extremely long range GFS. I wouldn't worry about that one either right now. But we'll keep watching, it's all we can do. Well, on the day in 1988, Hurricane Joan was about to make landfall. A very powerful storm into Central America would make landfall in Nicaragua and then continue on into the Eastern Pacific, of course, where it became famed for becoming a double-barreled name, Joan Miriam. But at this point it was still only Joan. Very powerful storm that blew up very last minute on 2 occasions in the southwest Caribbean. We also had 2 category 1 typhoons on this day. Pat, which was I think near Hainan Island there, and Ruby, which was headed through the Philippine Sea right now, is actually very close to Palau at this moment in time. But back to this year, on October 22nd, the next name on the Atlantic naming list is still Lisa. In the Eastern Pacific it's Seymour, and in the Central Pacific we are still waiting for Hone, rain or shine, summer or winter. It seems to be always the case. In the Western Pacific the next name is Nalgi, and in the North Indian Ocean we are indeed still waiting for Sitrang, although every day it seems to be getting one step closer. I think quite possibly we might have it by tomorrow night's update. And in the Southern Hemisphere, the next name in the Australian region is Darian, Southwest Indian Ocean, Cheniso, and in the South Pacific, it's Harley. That's all from tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.